Meeting of the Radnor Township Board of Health will come to order. Please rise and join me in pledging allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Due to an apparent technical glitch, we do not, in fact, have the minutes of the May meeting for approval tonight, so we will do that at our very next meeting. At this point, I'd like to ask our Township Health Officer, Mr. Larry Taltone, to make his announcements. But before he does that, let me just announce that Madeline Saldivar, Dr. Saldivar, is to be recorded as an excused absence for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon to the board and to the members, the residents who decided to come out tonight for the Board of Health meeting. During the month of May, we did 23 food safety inspections throughout the township. 20 bathing places. This is the time that the pools open up for the season, and we do an opening inspection, which includes about 21 points that we look at as far as pool safety. We had 10 quality of life issues that we dealt with, ranging from dog bites to property maintenance issues, grass trash, that type of things. We also had a temporary event, which was the Mainline Jazz and Food Festival, which was very successful. And we have some upcoming events, which is the Philadelphia Freedoms Tennis Tournament at the Villanova Pavilion, which is coming up. Last week, we held a seminar regarding rabies here in this very room. It was a result of the rabies fox that we had here in the township, and we thought it was important to educate health officers, animal control officers, police officers, those people who have, through their vocation, the opportunity to address these issues. So we had people from Pennsylvania Department of Health, Montgomery County Health Department, various municipalities throughout the county who attended. Delaware Community Health, a lot of people attended. It was very well received and done. Also, I just want to kind of re-announce what we announced last month, is that very soon, any inspections, food safety inspections that are done in Radnor Township will be placed on the township's website for residents to see what the food establishment is like as far as food safety. Any inspections that are done beginning July 1 will be on the township website, and there will be a link on the state's website to bring you to our site. I think that's important with the schools that we have in the township and the colleges that we have, that people will be able to see what the eateries are like here. Mr. Chairman, so ends my report.
Thank you. Can you tell us, Mr. Taltone, what was the turnout for the rabies awareness, prevention, and control seminar?
It was around 23, 24 people from various levels and of the government, from the state health department. Some people was here from the Department of Agriculture, again from Montgomery County Health Department. I think we had one from Philadelphia, so we had a pretty good turnout. Good.
Are there any questions for Mr. Taltone based on his report? Hearing none, we'll move on to old business. Under teen health issues, Ms. Lee has been working, as I think I indicated at our last meeting. We held a meeting with the school superintendent, Dr. Grobman, and the director of student services, Mr. Kane. I hope I've finally gotten your title correct. And we had a number of ideas that we're working on. One thing that we learned was that the school district has a copy machine that is capable of copying from our material to actually make posters, and we will be mounting these posters in September in the middle school, the high school, in this building, and in the Radnor Township Memorial Library. So that poster is being worked on. We thought it was finished, but apparently one of the locations that was marked off is now no longer there, so it just needs to be reworked, and at some point in the next week or so, Ms. Lee will be dropping off the final work. Mr. Taltone, I've suggested that she leave it at the front desk in an envelope marked to your attention, and you can get in touch with me as soon as
That'll be
that's here.
fine.
Thank you. Are there any questions about that, the progress on that?
I just wanted to add one thing. I mean, there's just a lot of national attention on sugary drinks. There was a sugary drink summit in Washington, D.C. that Mayor Michael Nutter from Philadelphia was the keynote speaker for. There's a meeting next Monday at Albert Einstein Medical Center on sugary beverages. So I think this poster will really be very timely in terms of helping with the, promoting health in our community. So good job.
Any other comments or questions on that? Next item is the deer management report. Now, we've actually had Ms. Burns, you were involved in the very beginning on that. Could you try to bring us up to date on where that is?
Yes, they had a meeting last week. Commissioner Schaefer is the in charge of the safety. It's one of the subgroups, the subcommittee of public safety. She's the chair of that committee. And it was decided last week, 'cause there was a number of different recommendations for how to handle the deer population. We have too many deer in our township. The U.S. Department of Agriculture has done studies, and they've determined that we just have too many deer. So then this Elaine Schaefer took it upon herself and her subcommittee of public safety to look at some different options that were available from other states, other counties, to decide what would be best for our township. There was a meeting last week on June 7th, the deer management meeting, and at that time it was decided that she will be recommending the deer culling, and that she will be bringing that back to the Board of Commissioners. She felt that she was going to try to have it discussed tonight's meeting, but she said that there was a lot of things that were on the commissioners' agenda, so she thought July would probably be more, in a time frame. So just some of the specifics is that it would be hiring the sharpshooters. They would do 10 nights. They would be professional sharpshooters that were specifically trained by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. There are surrounding townships that do the same thing. They have sharpshooters that go out, and these are people that are trained to, to shoot the deer. And that the other thing is that was going to be recommended, which was brought up earlier, was to invite hunting on private land, but these hunting groups would have to be vetted through the police department, so they would know, exactly what, the limits of what they can be doing. And as always, there was the public education that would be out there for people to know exactly how to try to get some of the deer population either away from their land, which is one of the big issues too. But, the whole sort of the bottom line is that we just have too many deer, and this is the decision that the Public Safety Commission will be recommending to the Board of Commissioners.
Do you know if this method of culling the deer is adopted? How will any public education get done in advance of that?
It does not say, because what it has here is that due to budgetary constraints, there would be 10 nights of the sharpshooting. There are times which I'm just reporting and won't give my report, were from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. So there's going to have to be a lot of dissemination of information to the public, because that's kind of still early in the evening, and so they would have to give out that information. This is just going to be taken to the board. So, it's the recommendation. So as far as what will be told to the public, will have to be, it's going to have to be, right out there, and people are going to have to understand exactly what this means. And, there are some different community, there's one someone from Tredyffrin who butts up to Radnor, who's, they are, I don't know if they're exactly going to try to do some sort of, they are working on a campaign against it, and actually are circulating a petition against it also. So it's kind of, the recommendations out there. The Board of Commissioners will have to decide on it, and then, the dissemination of information will have to be, put out. There's nothing in here as far as how that's going to be done.
As far as you know, is there a target? We know that there are too many, no pun intended.
Sorry.
Is there a goal? How much, by what percent are they looking to reduce the deer population?
The only information was looking at the Lower Marion Township, and it just, a lot of it is just numbers, and that was all, when I went to the very first meeting, it was numbers versus population. The only percentage of population was the concern of the number of the increase of the deer population, which was going to be, they felt 20% increasing over the next year.
Dr. Donato, so there's no way to give Bambi birth control?
It really doesn't prove to be effective, but at the same time, I have some concerns based on the very same report that they have about people hunting deer within 50 yards of a residence or building. They're not allowed to do that. And in Radnor Township, that really limits the number of areas. But that's just with a bow. With a firearm, they have to be 150 yards away. That's a football field and a half. I'm just not sure how they really accomplish that, and particularly since my daughter found a hunting arrow 5 feet from our front door not too long ago. I'm a little concerned, not only as a board member, but as a resident of Radnor Township, where these stray arrows, or if they're using firearms, where they may be going. And I'm just not sure where in Radnor Township there's a football field and a half. I'm sure there's a couple of places here and there, but it's concerning to me. And I'm wondering how this is really going to work.
I think the other, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the two communities that did have, that did have the private hunting, and there's no way that there was enough space that you're giving, that they did private hunting according to like this inviting the hunters on private land. And this is the vetting by the police department is something that sounds relatively new. So people who are doing the private hunting, I don't, that the vetting is something that they're bringing up now.
Did they give an indication if this is something that they're going to continue year after year? Because one of the, when you're talking about population of deer, if this isn't something that's done every year, the population of deer will actually explode in the other direction. We'll have more deer than when we started. But I don't know if they gave any indication of that. It's a concern for me as well. That will actually make the problem worse if sustained hunting is not part of the plan.
No, the only thing that they looked at, the other thing that they looked at actually was how many nights of sharpshooting that they were going to be able to do, and that the most reasonable and that was the 10 days. But it didn't sound like there was any type of going on from year to year.
I mean, Dr. Denard, what would you propose, ideally?
Well, I just don't know how we do this safely in the first place. I mean, I'm having a hard time getting past that part. So I guess I would propose not doing it unless we really are able to adhere to these guidelines, because public safety, it's pretty important to me. So
And just control of the population. What would you have an ideal suggestion?
Well, I think in part of their plan is education, which I think we continue to do. I think the other part that we continue to do is identify the areas where there's issues and improve lighting, use deer fencing in those areas. Those are some of the ways that are probably going to be more productive, because we're going to cull deer, and if that's not a process that continues each year, the population's going to get worse. I mean, it's just I'm not optimistic this is a long-term plan based on what we're hearing right now.
So will the population sort of level out without doing something? Is that your point?
Well,
I mean, I understand.
Yes, it will level out. The population levels out. But if we do the culling and it's not consistent, the population numbers will be higher consistently, then they will level off higher. And this is proven biology. I mean, we know this happens when populations are attempted to be managed. And so our problem will be worse, and we'll have more issues than we do now. So I'm not sure that that's been looked at. I've not been asked, and so I don't know what the plan is.
There is a statement from Township D'Angelo, I'm not sure who he is, that agreed that one season and perhaps continued seasons of culling will not put an end to the deer-related problem. So there is, I mean, they're just talking as far as superintendent. So, I mean, he's addressing the fact that they know that this isn't, a panacea, is what he's saying, as far as an option. So I still think that it sounds, as far as different options that are available, and education is mentioned frequently. And there were groups at the initial meeting, Friends of Animals in Philadelphia, Advocates for Deers, the group that's at a different that's advocate for deers are, they're the ones that are for education. There are options that people have looked at, and the whole birth control issue is they've tried. It's not successful. So I think I'm not really sure how this is all going to go out, but this is what she will be proposing to the full Board of Commissioners, either tonight or in July.
The interesting thing about it in their report was that apparently in this hunting area, which they break down into a number of areas in Pennsylvania, there were, I think, 5,000 deer culled last year from just regular hunting, yet our problem continues to get worse, supposedly. So it's, again, I almost feel like we're headed towards making the problem worse. And, yeah, it would be interesting to talk to somebody about that.
We are joined now by Mr. John Fisher from the Board of Commissioners, who is the liaison from the Board of Commissioners to the Board of Health. Mr. Fisher, we were just discussing the deer management issue, and Ms. Burns has given us to understand that either this evening or in July, some resolution will be presented to permit some form of hunting, and as a means of culling the deer. And the the board does have some concerns related to safety concerns about that and overall effectiveness. So is that in fact coming before the Board of Commissioners tonight?
Yeah, I apologize for my lateness to the meeting. We have a meeting tonight that is expected to run about 5 to 6 hours. So I had a little preparation to do before I got here. Yes, tonight on the agenda we have 2 items. One is authorization of the state to do a controlled culling event. And then the second, I believe, I don't have the agenda open in front of me, but there was also talk of authorizing hunting in a different way than we currently have. Currently, it is legal to have hunting on private land with bow, but we're looking at this problem as being a lot bigger than we've ever had before. It's not clear to me that this cull event that we're planning to engage in will address the issue fully. We'll see how it turns out tonight. I'm not even certain the motion will pass tonight, but we're essentially looking at spending around $50,000 to have this culling event, and I believe the result of that would be the projections are that we would eliminate about maybe as much as a third of the deer population. So that's all I have now. It's not really in my area. This is Commissioner Schaefer was kind of heading up this issue because most of the deer issues are in her ward that affect her constituents. She held a meeting, or was involved in holding a meeting in the public a few weeks back, and also getting the state involved, in this process.
One of the concerns we have, while it is true that Genevieve Burns has represented the Board of Health at some of the meetings, there has been limited, if any, input on the part of the veterinarian who sits on this board, Dr. Len Donato, who has previously brought a lot of information to our attention and the attention of the Board of Commissioners with regard to this issue. And so, as I said, we have a concern about that. And Dr. Donato, just before you walked in, was expressing some of his concerns about the plan.
Yes, I understand. I think what has happened with this issue, even though the Board of Health has been involved in kind of getting behind and getting the studies done, the Township Police Department, because of the public safety issues involving vehicles and vehicle traffic, and the large number of incidents involving vehicles and deer, they took it upon themselves. The new police chief, Chief Colarulo, has taken upon himself to take this issue on, directly, and look at the options. I was not in attendance at that meeting that was held. I believe there was a meeting held at the library concerning this issue. It's not really a big issue for my ward because we generally don't have a lot of deer in the 7th Ward. However, it's certainly an issue that affects all the residents of the township. So it was, as I understand, it was the police chief's interest in addressing this issue directly, and that's what took us to the motion that's on the table tonight with the Board of Commissioners. I'm going to pull my agenda out, and I can read that to you, and I can also give you some background in a moment.
I do have a question, though, as far as if you're going to pull out your information as far as the percentage of deer that are going to be culled. Because when they talked about the Lower Merion Township using it, and in the article from the paper from 2009 to 2011, they only removed 288 deer. And as far as the percentage being as high as what you're stating, that seems to be pretty high versus what the Lower Merion's Township was able to do. But again, I'm not, I don't want to quote you. I mean, you weren't looking at your notes.
Going through my agenda, it's about, unfortunately, it's not tabulated, so I have to dig through this. Give me about a minute, and I'll come back to you. But tonight's resolution, 2012-76, is authorizing the township to enter into a contract with the USDA for a deer management program. So I'm not even that familiar with the entire program, but it involves, in essence, sharpshooters coming into the township in a very controlled environment, generally doing it during the time from midnight till 6 a.m. From what I understand, additional police officers will be involved in making sure that effort is well protected from the public, and that the public in the neighborhoods where it's happening are familiar and aware that it's happening. There's also a discussion preceding that in terms of Radnor Township's deer management plan. So I think in general, we're looking at this tonight. It's not clear to me if the motions will pass. Again, it wasn't my issue. I'm generally in support of this issue only because I'm seeing an increased incidence of accidents involving motor vehicles and deer. And for the commissioners, the most important issue for us is public safety, and especially involving vehicle accidents and whatnot. Apparently, the USDA runs these programs throughout the state of Pennsylvania. I would agree that your comment that the projection may be a little too rosy in terms of its effectiveness. It's probably not going to be as effective as we want it to be, but it may be the beginning of a process that takes several years to get the deer population to a number that the USDA recommends to be a healthy number of deer per square miles. So that's the information. I do have, and I believe we'll have out on the tables tonight, some literature from the USDA. So I believe that may even be in the room at this point. So if we want to take a look at that before, at the end of the meeting, we can do that.
One of the concerns in the USDA's report that they mention in Delaware County is that hunters have to be a minimum of 50 yards away from any residence or building with archery equipment, and playgrounds, schools, nurseries, daycare centers, they have to be 150 yards away. And the same thing with the shotgun or any firearm have to be 150 yards away. I think one of the main concerns of this board is that we're concerned where that actually happens, because that we're talking about a football field and a half of space all around, and that's huge. I just don't know where that is.
And I think that
from
is
a public safety standpoint that the Board of Commissioners is also concerned about. This should really be concerning to you, because I don't know where that is.
And I think that's why we're at the place that we're at. I think a long time ago, we had a lot of open space where this type of activity would naturally occur. A lot of hunters that lived in the area would use private land. But I think in the last 10 years or so, those areas have shrunk, and there are virtually fewer areas for this to happen. And I think what we're seeing is a result of that. We're seeing the result that there really isn't a lot of hunting going on in Radnor Township at this point, even with bow. So I think the township's being faced with, kind of a prisoner's dilemma here. We either have the USDA come in with sharpshooters, or the problem continues to get worse, and then we start to see, God forbid, fatalities and motor vehicle accidents as a result of the deer population. So we're hoping that we can address this directly. At this, like I had mentioned, this is under public safety. This initiative really is being driven by the police department and their interest and their requirement to ensure public safety. The Board of Health should be involved in this activity in terms of public safety and health. And I welcome you to come to the meeting tonight to voice your concerns and opinions. But I think also, I don't want to speak for the police department, but they do have a role and a responsibility in this that somewhat transcends even the commissioners. They have a requirement to make sure the public is safe, and it really isn't up to the elected officials to do that. That's not our job. Our job is to make sure that we have a robust and effective police department. So at this point, I don't really have much other comment. I'm going to try to pull this document out of my binder and share some comments with you about it, but unfortunately, this issue is driven by staff at this point, and I have to respect their position, that where they're taking it, but I certainly value your opinion in this, and if you have a counter opinion at this point and you'd like to share it with the Board of Commissioners, yeah, I will carry that with me tonight, but also I welcome you to come to the meeting as well.
Right. Unfortunately, it's a little short notice for me, but because I wasn't aware it was an agenda item this evening. The other concern, I guess, from, again, public safety is I think we just keep these things in mind. The other question that I had was if this is something that's going to happen on a regular basis, because when there's a large die-off of a population of whatever animal it may be, usually within 2 years, depends on the animal, could be a year, could be 2 years, the population rebounds higher than it was prior to the initial die-off. So if there's not a long-term plan of culling, this may be making our problem worse in a year or two, and that's something that is proven science. We know that. So I would, this has to be part of the long-term plan if culling is going to be considered. And the police, if they think they have a problem now, will have a much bigger problem if this is not a sustained effort.
I appreciate the comments, and I think I share in those comments. And I believe the police department is looking for a long-term plan. And what the motion tonight, it's item CC on our agenda, is a discussion concerning a long-term plan.
One, in terms of public safety, you've mentioned that the resolution would, if approved, authorize a contract with the United States Department of Agriculture, USDA is the agency you mentioned. Do they actually employ the sharpshooters all the time, or are they going to subcontract with?
It's my understanding that this is an internal operation that they run. They actually have special vehicles that they use for this process. And apparently what I was told, the sharpshooters are employees of the USDA, and this is their job. They do this probably throughout the U.S., but certainly within Pennsylvania. This is an operation that goes on probably throughout the year in different areas. If we contract with them, we are not their first client. We're not going to be their last client. It seemed to me like the most reasonable approach in terms of safety, rather than having just hunters come in and try to certify hunters to come in and do this, to have a more controlled system in place. And that's why it carries an expensive cost. In addition to that, in my reading of the original documentation that came with it, with this proposal, we would be looking to recover the deers and also make those meats available for consumption. And I understand that we would be, as part of the cost, we would be paying for that process. So, doing the best we can, and it's a tough situation. I think everyone in the room probably loves animals, and you never want to have to do this, but when public human life and safety are at stake, our choices start to get limited, and we have to sometimes do things we don't want to do. But I appreciate the comments about the long-term approach, because I'm concerned that we could spend a lot of money to solve the issue temporarily and then have it just come back in a year or two. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Well, yeah, as far as the long-term plan, it should probably be voted on at the same time, because if you do the culling now and the long-term plan is shelved even for, a few months from now, the problem is if that long-term plan goes away or we find that there's no money for it, our problem is worse. And we've voted on the part that makes it better very temporarily, but then it gets worse later on. So it really should be voted on all at the same time if, again, that's what is determined to be the best course of action. The other thing, I was just curious from a safety standpoint, again, if there's sharpshooters coming in, are these distances that are established by Delaware County, do they go away? I mean, that's a good question to ask, because as it is, it's not that far, but if those go away with special sharpshooters from the USDA, I would be very interested in wanting to know about that.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the Board of Commissioners will have a lot of questions like that tonight. It was explained to us that sharpshooters will be using special vehicles that puts them at a higher elevation, so most of their shots will be downward. So the idea is that if there is a stray bullet, most likely it would be going into the ground and not going any distance. That was something that we weren't necessarily guaranteed if we had independent private hunters doing this work. So my hope is that if we can get through that tonight, fully understand it and fully understand the long-term plan, then maybe we'll have a good strategy in place. But it's still a big question in my mind where this is headed and whether or not this is the best direction to head in. I do have, Dr. Donato, I do have some questions that maybe you could answer. Do you know of any other processes that we should be going through? Aside from the culling, we understand what culling is going to do, but is there any other management process that we may want to consider to benefit this process long-term, in terms of non-lethal means of controlling populations and reducing the likelihood of the populations reoccurring?
Yeah, and we've discussed some of them where the impact of cars and deer there's different reasons for it, and some of those are speed related. So managing speed limits, and I know that's not an easy thing to do. There are areas where there's a channeling effect where a deer will get on the road, and because of the natural landscape, it gets kind of trapped in there, and they're stuck on the road. So deer fencing and other creative landscaping can minimize that. Continuing to identify the areas where most hits take place and having proper lighting and proper signage, those are things that have been known to help. So those are some of the recommendations that we've come up with before.
Thank you. I'll bring those concerns tonight to the conversation.
Thank you for that, Mr. Fisher. The next item under old business is the Alliance for Safe Kids, or ASK. As I've reported previously, the Alliance for Safe Kids, which is a group of folks composed of people from the high school and the middle school and parents, and this board is represented on that by myself, has two programs a year, one in the fall and one in the spring, around the theme to promote safety for kids. The one in last fall was on internet safety and cyberbullying, and the one this spring was on helping kids make a successful transition to college. And that was a very good program, and in fact the Radnor High School Scholarship Fund, which this year awarded 24 scholarships to Radnor High School graduating seniors, also provided a DVD of that program to each of the scholarship recipients. And I want to publicly thank Mr. Jim Doling for his help in reproducing the program onto those DVDs. What I want to ask now is for members of this board to think over the summer of topics that we could bring to the Alliance for Safe Kids for the fall program, and to and Mr. Kane, that would include you as well, so that we can discuss those and maybe give them 5 or 6 alternatives to consider. Thank you. Ms. Doyle, do you have anything to report from the Environmental Advisory Council?
The EAC met last Monday on the 11th. They did not meet in May. There wasn't much relevant to the Board of Health, but the same discussion ensued related to the deer population and what we're doing about it. I would like to announce that the Radnor EAC was honored with a Green Award by the Mainline Today magazine in April. And there was a good presentation on recycling in Radnor. Turns out that recycling compliance has actually gone down since 2008 in Radnor. I was surprised to hear that. So there was a lot of discussion about ways to increase compliance and awareness and education related to that. So,
I'm curious, how is compliance measured? People
they weigh because a lot of the recycling you get paid for your recycling waste. So it was weighed, and in terms of reimbursement for that, Josh Hilbert did a really great presentation on that and did a study on it. He also spent time in the middle schools and high schools, and I was surprised to hear that he observed what was going on in terms of recycling, and he said in an hour, probably 1 out of 100 kids recycled. So I was surprised to hear that, because I thought that with that generation, recycling would be hardwired, but it turns out it is not.
Did the numbers that they were including include businesses and their estimates?
Yes, and there was also some public comment from a business owner in Wayne who was very concerned. He watches the recycling, and he feels as though most businesses are not compliant with that.
One of the interesting things that, I unfortunately have been seeing a lot of, for lease, it makes me think a lot of businesses are not doing well overall, and then you start to see spaces for lease. And I wonder if the drop in recycling, oddly enough, starting in 2008 when we had our recession start, I wonder if somebody looked at that to see if that's why the recycling has dropped, and it's not so much an individual person kind of thing, but a business thing.
I'm not sure. I mean, I can follow up on it. It was interesting. I'm not sure if Josh is going to put that presentation on the website, but I will check and I will email you. But it was very interesting. So, and I think maybe I was really shocked about the school piece. And and Radnor is looking at different ways. There's so many rules around it. If your recycling is contaminated, the whole thing has to be thrown away. So you cannot recycle that. So I think a lot of it is education. So they're going to start a sticker program where if instead of just picking it up and throwing your recycling in the trash, they will not pick it up and sticker it so that your residents are educated that we can't use this for recycling because it's contaminated. So.
Any questions about that? Comments? Thank you, Ms. Doyle. That ends the old business. Is there any new business for tonight's meeting?
I had one item, which was just that the intern that we had last year, Allison Mosier Mills, was a winner of the 2012 National Council of Teachers of English Achievement Award in Writing. So that she is one of 274 winners nationwide and one of only 12 in Pennsylvania and the only one in Delaware County. So that's a good thing.
Should add that congratulations to the school district, because that's the second in a row where Radnor High School was the only one in Delaware County to achieve that. So that's great. Any further new business? Okay.
I just had one thing. As far, and you may know more about this, but my understanding is that the new federal regulations about school lunches go into effect with the next school year, so whole grains for everything, and low-fat milk and less sugar and all these really good things, although according to my kids, bad things. But these good things are all supposed to happen starting September, that it's a quick implementation. Do you know about that?
No, I'm not familiar with that. I'd have to talk. We have a district dietitian we'd have to talk to.
At this point, I'd like to ask if there is any comments or concerns or questions from members of the public who are here with us this evening.
We're nursing students from Villanova.
I'm sorry, why don't you come?
Some of us are residents of Radnor Township and others aren't, but we're working on a community project and our community was Radnor, so.
Would you mind coming and saying that into this mic, because otherwise our viewing audience couldn't hear you. I think the citizens would be interested in knowing about what you're doing.
About it. Okay, so my name is Joanne Martin. I am a resident of Radnor Township. I'm a Villanova nursing student, and these are my peers, and we were assigned to Radnor Township. We're doing a health assessment over the community, and one of our things was to attend one of the Board of Health meetings. So that's why we're here this evening. You may be hearing from us again via email. We have all your emails off of the internet in case we have any questions. So.
Well, we'd be really interested in hearing the results of your survey, and also if you come up, based on your survey, if you come up with recommendations of, either issues that you think should be addressed, and, anything could be particular to ages or, school children, older people, adults, et cetera. That'd be really great to have that help with what we should be focusing on as
I think it is actually going to be shared with you. Professor Ryan is our advisor, and she used to be on the board, I was told, many, many, many years ago. Okay. I think someone at Villanova is working with somebody in the township to provide our information to you. So if not, one of us will. So. So,
We'll look forward to hearing that, and as you said, you have our emails if there are any questions, even before the report is produced. And there are at least 3 nurses on, or members of the nursing profession on this board, so,
terrific.
yeah.
When do you think, what is your timeline?
We graduate July 31st, so I think this is all due. We just started. It was just assigned to us 2 weeks ago. And I think the deadline I don't have my timeline in front of me, but I think that the 25th of July, we should have it all finished. So we'll get it to you. Okay. Thank you.
Does anyone else have anything to add? Okay. The formal part of this meeting then will be adjourned, and let me announce that this board does not normally meet during July or August, unless, of course, we were to have a public health emergency. But our next meeting, barring that, will be September 17th, 2012, at 5:00 p.m. in this room. And at this point, I'd like to ask Alexa Lee and her mother to join me in front of this podium, and as many members of the board who would like to also be part of that. Mr. Fisher, you're welcome as the liaison. I'm going to present. We're going to present Alexa Lee with a certificate of appreciation, and what it says is, in recognition of your dedicated service to the public health, safety, and welfare of the Radnor Township community, and volunteering as the intern to the Radnor Township Board of Health for the 2011-2012 school year. Please know that your work is appreciated, and we thank you for your service. And it's signed by Mr. William Spingler, the President of the Board of Commissioners, Robert Zenkowski, the Radnor Township Manager, and of course myself as Chair of the Board of Health. And this is what it looks like. Why don't we all come in so we can get... Now, could someone take the camera? I'd like Alexa's mom to get in the picture. Take the camera temporarily, anyway. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. But your work isn't done yet, you know.
Thank you for your service.